Buen día, mi gente, and welcome to La Vida Más Chévere, the podcast where child-free, Spanglish-speaking individuals can help get over the toxic BS we all grew up with. This used to be an audio-only podcast, and here we are. Today, I invited a few friends to discuss this weird idea floating around that child-free people hate kids, because it's not true for us. So we're trying to dismantle this idea through an open discussion. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I think I'm doing this right. Hit the notification bell and let's get into the discussion because, I'm not going to solve this on my own. Welcome, everyone, to our discussion on whether or not child-free people hate children, which the four people here are very confused by. As you can see the look on Josie's face right now. She's like, I'm a mom. I don't get that. I'm just putting words in your mouth, Josie. But thank you all for being here. I'm Paulette Arado, the host and creator of La Vida Más Chévere through the child-free lens, which means we're just living our best life from the point of view of a child-free Latina. Let me introduce you to my panel. We have Brianna, who is a child-free Latina. We have Josie Falcon, who is a Latina mom. And then we have Deanna Seymour, who is also a mom. So we have two child-free Latinas on this call and two moms on this call. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
And again, this is about my pet peeve with the argument that child-free people hate kids. It's something I hear enough and regularly enough that I'm like, where does this come from? And that's why I've invited each of you here to do this. So I'm just going to give you a minute each to introduce yourselves. So go ahead, Brianna, let's start with you.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name's Brianna. I am 33. I would like to say that I have been child-free for life, but in reality, I confirmed that decision about 6 months ago when I had a hysterectomy. That hysterectomy was not purely just a fun decision. There were some medical issues around PCOS and endometriosis that encouraged me to make that decision for myself, but it just reaffirms my child-free status for myself.
Thank you, Brianna. Josie, you're up.
So, hi, my name is Josie. I just turned 50. Thank you. I have a 26-year-old son, and I thought I was just going to be a boy mom. But 12 years ago, I had a daughter, the daughter I had dreamed about my entire life. So I did always envision myself being a mom. What I wanted a long time ago was twin identical girls. And thank God he knew better than me on that because that would have been a disaster. But so, I'm a mom of two.
Thanks, Josie. And Deanna.
All right, I'm Deanna Seymour. I am a graphic designer and 42 years old and a mom of a almost 4-year-old little boy and almost 7-year-old girl. So, or at least right now. I'm open to whatever they want to be. I'm like, man, that's not a really binary, but that's what they're going with for now. If they change their minds, I hope that we have a very open relationship and we can discuss that. But that's another panel, maybe.
That is another panel. Well, welcome, everyone. So the topic of our discussion here today is why does the belief that child-free people hate kids exist and why is it so prevalent? So I have some ideas about it, and I think it starts very young when we watch Disney movies because all the villains are usually going after kids. So that right there is just telling us that these child-free people are villainous. They're deadly. And that's kind of a scary message to be putting out there. What is everybody else's takes on it?
So I guess I'll jump in. So for me personally, I feel like there's a lot of fear. It may not be conscious fear, but anytime you break away from the pack, anytime we go against the grain, other people look at that and there's a little bit of fear that might pop up, whether they want to recognize it or not. And a lot of people may not recognize it as fear. But what happens when we become afraid of something? We get defensive, we get protective. And so I think through conversations like this, really kind of diving into some of those fears and making sure that people have a good space to have those discussions and to be heard equally, I think that's going to be part of how we tackle this. This little bit of fear that pops up and makes us a little bit defensive of things that are different to us and things that we don't necessarily understand from others.
I can see that. I'm thinking back to I love Disney. I love the Disney movies. And I guess maybe coming from a perspective of where I don't ever remember not wanting kids. I didn't see that perspective in the characters. Now that you pointed it out, I'm probably going to see it in every other movie I ever see. But I can see where that can be, that's what most of them have in common. So it does put them, in not a very good column.
Yeah, the light that they're painted with is a little dark. Go ahead, Deanna.
Right.
Oh, I think Brianna, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, I think it's just like people think, I don't know, even like planning a wedding is something we dream about since we're little, or like maybe some of us have dreamed about having kids. So it's like, if that's what most people are doing, then when you're not doing it, they're like, hey, wait, what? What's that? And then I have another theory, which I think is a little controversial. And I need to start off by saying, I love my kids. I'm very happy I'm a mom. I adore them and I'm happy with the decision that I've made. But it's really hard. So I think part of it might be like jealousy, or like a little bit like misery loves company. Like, I did it. This thing is really hard. And so you have to do it too, or else there's something wrong with you, or you must hate kids, like going to that polar opposite of like whatever. So, I mean, like I said, I love my kids, but it's hard. It's a hard job. And so I think sometimes people are just projecting that onto other people. And you're not really allowed to complain too much about how hard it is. So maybe that's where that like frustration is coming out on people who don't choose not to have kids. And then you're like jealous. I don't know. That's what I think. I always think of those people.
I think
Yeah.
that is a good point, because I would also go maybe on the other aspect of the jealousy of seeing all the freedom that people that do not have kids have. I think when you're like, I can't move because I have to pick the good school zone. I can't go on vacation because it's not spring break, those kind of things. And then there's these other people that are like, hey, it's the middle of whatever month and I'm on vacation. You see that and you feel a little bit of that, that jealousy. So I could see where some people might take it there. Yeah.
Hey, Dilly, thanks for joining us.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I apologize for being late.
No problem. Hi, Dilly.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dilliana, or Dilly for short. I am a 34-year-old nanny, and I am child-free. I live in Virginia now, but I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward. We'll see how that goes. But right now, yeah, I'm actually at work. That's me in a nutshell.
Thanks for joining us. What we're discussing is kind of a high level. Why does this idea that child-free people hate kids exist? And you're the perfect person to answer this, because you are a child-free person that works with kids. You obviously don't hate kids, or you would hate your job,
No, I
right?
don't.
And you don't hate your job, I'm assuming.
No, I mean, no, I don't. Not at all. I am lucky that I have this wonderful family that I've been with for the past 4 years, and I've gotten a chance to see both of their kids grow, and it's just been such a full experience having been part of their lives and continuing to be part of their lives. I mean, like, their little one, I've had her since she was a baby. She was like 8 months old when I first started. So like the bond that she and I share is unlike any other one that I've had with another child. And I'm so happy to have this experience with them. So the idea of like child-free people not liking children is astonishing to me. I'm like, wait, what? Like, yeah, some might not like them, just like they don't know how to interact with them. I get it. But when you think of them, they're small people. Just act the way you would act with an adult. Just take it down a notch.
Yes, they are people. We were all children once, right? So that's kind of one of the
Exactly.
bingos that is thrown at us. And for anybody who's not familiar with that term, there are certain comments that are so regularly said or questions asked of child-free people like Dilly, Brianna, and I, that we have created what's called a bingo card. Like I 54, it's like, well, you must hate kids, or you'll regret it when you're older, or who's going to take care of you
Yeah.
when you're older. All of these things are so common that, there's this metaphorical bingo card. And
Yes.
so do you hate kids is on there, because again, it's so prevalent. So back to what Josie and Deanna, our moms, were saying, it's that, maybe there's a little bit of misery loves company in the equation, and in this binary thinking that either you love kids and then become a mom, or hate kids and don't become a mom. And we're talking moms because we all are women here. There's a huge chasm in between those two perspectives, or those two endpoints. And there's so many shades of gray, because there are people who hate kids. They exist in
Yes.
this world, and they are not all child free.
Mhm.
True.
True. Yes.
I mean, I think we all know someone who should not have had kids, and was maybe didn't even want to, but because of the culture or the time period, that wasn't an option. And now that it is an option for us and future generations, there's a little bit of pushback there. It's not a little bit. There's a lot of pushback. Otherwise, we wouldn't be constantly attacked on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on all of these social media platforms, for just being like, "Hi, I'm child free."
Exactly.
Like, the term itself is so loaded, but it's completely okay to walk around, like Josie was saying earlier, in a t-shirt that says, "I'm a boy mom." Like, it's totally okay. It's totally okay. And child free people aren't allowed to feel a certain way about that. Okay, well, let's turn that around. If I just wanted to wear a t-shirt that says I'm child free, or metaphorically wear my t-shirt on a social media platform saying I'm child free, why does that trigger so many people? What is that? So we have some
I
questions, but go ahead, Dilly.
Great example for me, at least. My mother, when I told her about this whole thing, her first reaction was, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm perfectly fine. Like, I can, if I wanted to have them, I can. Like, there's nothing wrong with me biologically that I'm aware of. Like, I mean, that there's nothing wrong with me." She's like, "But you don't want them." I'm like, "Correct." She goes, "You know that there's women out there that go through IVF and like find every way." I was like, "Yes." She goes, "And you don't want them and you can have them." I was like, "Correct." And she goes, and she just kept on like going in circles trying to like figure this out. She goes, "You're gonna regret it." I'm like, "No." She goes, "I was so happy when I was pregnant with you." I was like, "Great. Like, do you want a cookie?" Like, to me, like, pregnancy scares me. And she thought I was being dramatic about it. I was like, "I'm not, though."
Yeah, yeah, and
Like,
that's a common response.
yeah, exactly. She's like, "But it's such a wonderful time in your life." I was like, "Maybe for other people." But I know for a fact that like my best friend, when she was pregnant, she wasn't super happy about it. Like the way like her pregnancy went about, I'm like, I don't want to feel uncomfortable every single day, wake up and like having nausea and like all these other things and not know if essentially I'm going to survive childbirth, because I had a acquaintance who sadly died in
Oh
childbirth
my. And
after going through IVF, and like don't want to go through that.
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's an honest scenario that can happen. The probability of it might be very low, but it is a possibility.
Yeah.
And no one talks about that. Very few
No.
people.
No one
Let
does.
me actually ask the
Mm.
moms on the group, Josie and Deanna. Were those topics ever brought to your attention, like the possibility of all of these complications up to and including death? Was that something you were counseled about when you were pregnant with your two children each?
I don't think that I was. The counseling was, oh, let's do testing in case the child has something, but nothing specifically for us. I mean, they did give me a big long list about how much side effects there are in like the epidural, which is why I said no thank you for my first child, because I didn't want any of those complications, so I sucked it up. But, also I have in the Latina culture, right? My mom was with me in the hospital, and this is kind of a side note thingy, but she was telling me, don't scream, don't scream. Like I had no epidural, and she was telling me to, like, you got to be tough. Don't be being loud. Don't be, so if I made a noise, I would tell the nurse, sorry, and she's like, it's okay. But my mom was right there next to me, and she's like, don't scream. I'm
Oh
22
my
years
gosh.
old. I'm like, so Yeah, there's that. But you know
You know,
what? It wasn't so bad.
well, it's interesting now talking about birth stories because I labored for over a day without an epidural with my first, and then ended up having a C-section, and then went on to have a second kid. And so it's kind of interesting because I almost like consider it like elective surgery. Like I'm going to have another kid, which may very well end up in a second C-section, which is a major surgery. And nobody, like, you're right. Now that you're talking about this, I'm like, no one really says, like, are you sure you want to have another surgery? Like, that was a lot of recovery time. This is that. So that's interesting. You know, no one ever was like, questioned it. If I wanted to go get liposuction, I think a lot of people would be like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" But having a kid doesn't seem as like elective, you know?
And
I just like
and it's
my mind is blown.
100%. It's 100% elective because we're all child free until we're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've never like thought about that before.
That's scary. And now you're making me want to interview a few doctors on the topic because, like, why aren't you telling people all the possible complications? Like, I've heard about them, but just recently, and I'm about to be 45. Like, I'm past the childbirthing years, but and I've had a child-free gynecologist for the last 20 years, so maybe that's part of it. But it doesn't seem to be like out there, these ideas. Anyway, not the topic of conversation today, but a
Right.
future one, maybe. Thank you for putting that out there. So, the way it has happened to me on social media, like we were talking about bingos earlier, is I'll put out something I feel is rather innocuous that says I'm child free. At this time, the last time it was I had to go to Vegas for a conference, and next door a woman had brought her grandchildren, and they were being very rambunctious at like 6 a.m. one morning, and it's the middle of March, so it was cold and rainy. There wasn't a pool open, and I didn't understand why you would bring your kids to a hotel midweek. So I made a TikTok about it. I said, this is a child free channel. So what does everybody think about kids in hotels in Vegas? And the parents came into the comment section, and most of them were like, well, we live here, we have kids, and sometimes we take them there for fun. Like to get out of the house. Totally understandable. I get that.
Mhm.
And I don't mind engaging with parents on my child free channel, right? Brianna and Dilly, it might be different for you. You guys can chime in here. But there was one really caustic person that was like, oh, you just hate kids because you don't have kids. And I was like, but where did you make that jump from? So anybody else want to chime in on how they've received that?
I mean, I really have no idea where like parents get this like, hey, you don't have kids, therefore you hate kids. Because like you see so many child-free people who are engaged with children on a regular basis. I mean, I'm a nanny. I know another child-free girl who was a teacher. So like it's not like we're not exposed to children on a regular basis. It's like we want to give all of our selves to these children when we are with them and come home and recharge and be like, okay, now it's me time, which sounds selfish,
Right.
but like, I mean, the moms in here going, please give me time.
Sounds smart. It sounds smart to me. Sounds smart.
Exactly.
I say this jokingly in a way, but I get to do the mom thing, but I get to do it part time. And I get to go home and I get to recharge and I get to be there completely the next day with a completely new like set of mind and be like, okay, if something happened yesterday, I'm like, okay, I can put it to bed. I don't have to like take it on to into the next day. Whereas like when you have kids, when you're a parent, you're constantly doing this. And if your job is a teacher or like a professor or anything, that you're taking your experience with children into your home and recycling it. So like you never get this like, okay, I can put this to bed, recharge, recollect myself, and then do it again tomorrow. Like it's not about us hating kids. It's just more of like we love kids so much that we get to do this on a part-time basis and then be able to still be ourselves as adults and as human beings outside of being parents.
Brianna, what's your experience?
So I will lead with saying that I really have not experienced a lot of those comments, and I will explain how I got there as a child
Yes,
free
please.
person. So, I stated in my little introduction that I've always felt like I was child free, but you do, especially being a Latina, you do get that, oh, you'll change your mind later, or, you'll regret it later, just those little bingos here and there. So I learned to be quiet about it because, being the eldest Latina daughter, you kind of fall into obedience and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to be good and do whatever I need to do and, not cause a problem for my parents. But as I got older, I really sunk into that, like, okay, I'm just going to keep it to myself. And then I was in a relationship for a while where I was like, he really wants kids. I think I'll just give in. Thankfully, that was not in the cards. Left that relationship, realized, like, okay, I'm glad that did not happen. But it wasn't until I got my health diagnoses and was actively seeking a hysterectomy that I decided I'm going to start talking about this because I know I'm not the only one that's going through this. A lot of the issues that I had were normalized just strictly out of lack of education. And I want others to be aware, like, you don't have to go through this type of suffering. There's treatment options outside of just a hysterectomy. But for me, that was my choice. That was my best course of treatment for what I was facing. And so now I lead with that. I lead with the educational part of it. When people are like, oh, well, don't you want kids? I tell them, well, I can't have kids. I chose to make this health decision for myself because if I didn't, I probably would have been headed down the road towards cancer. And as soon as you bring up that C word, everything stops. And they go, oh. So, and to be fair, I am not super active on my social media right now. I've had to kind of pull back as I'm putting the pieces of my life back together, trying to get back to having a job, trying to just kind of re-normalize myself. I'm not that active on social media. So I am a supporter for other people's social media pages. And when I do see those comments, I try not to be a petty Betty. And and I try to ask open-ended questions that are maybe going to invite a conversation with somebody because I again feel like that's how we're going to crack the egg and find some common ground is let's have an open discussion where nobody is being judged and put your feelings out there and see if we can find a middle ground. And if we can't, that's cool, but I will still listen to you.
Right. Approaching it with curiosity is always a great defense, if not a good offense. But it is, I thought that I was like pretty lucky that I had not encountered a lot of the hate that's thrown towards child-free people until that happened. And that's what spawned this discussion. And I blocked the person, so they're never going to bother me again. And I got the sense that they were rather young for being, I don't know. It seemed like more of a Gen Z attitude through their, various comments as opposed to, someone who is a little older and more experienced in the world. I could be wrong. It could have been a 50-year-old woman expecting her first grandchild. And she's still stuck in her binary thinking that everything is black and white. You either have kids and love it or don't and hate them. So I could be wrong, but I do think going back to the list of questions we were going to discuss, the demographic seems to be locked inside of a box of traditional thinking, traditional gender norms, traditional, wife does all the emotional labor of the raising of the children and the father is the one that provides. But we live in a society that families look so many different ways. Not everybody has a mom and a dad. Sometimes people get two of each. Sometimes you get two of one and one of one, or whatever. And what I'm hoping is for everyone's kids to grow up to be well-adjusted human beings and save this planet. I mean, like I pay my taxes. I live in a good school district so that, good, my money's going towards education. And because I think an educated uh, populace is what keeps the wheels turning and advancements in society. But it seems that we're fighting against that idea. Like there's states across our country who want to take away choices and healthcare and benefits for children. They actively want to throw kids out on factory lines now. Child labor is coming back up.
Right. Jesus.
as if the last 100 years have not existed at all. Kids are going to go back to, working the sausage line.
Well, maybe that's why they want people to have more kids, because they're like, wait a minute, you're taking away our workforce. We just want to keep them dumb and keep them working.
Ding, 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 ding,
Exactly.
ding, 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 ding. And I think that that's the crux of it. There's a lot of the loudest people are, or the loudest opponents, let's say, because we're all on the same team. I want to make that clear. Everybody who is invited to speak on this understands that different strokes for different folks. So, there's nobody on this panel that thinks that child-free people suck. There's nobody on this panel that thinks moms suck. We are all on the same team. It's us against this division.
Right.
So I probably should have said that at the beginning. So I'll throw this question out to all of you. What can we do to overcome? Well, we're not going to solve it, but what are some ideas that could be put forth about combating the idea? Where does it start? I think is the better question, because Dilly, Brianna, and I could be out there waving our child-free freak flags all day long. That doesn't necessarily change the conversation unless Brianna takes the time to have a conversation with every single person. That's exhausting, and that's not all on her. How do moms jump into this conversation? Because, and I'll tell you this, because Josie has already done it once for me, live and in person, not on social media, but we were in a session together where, you're describing your podcast. And I was like, it's for child-free Latinas. And I'm talking to another Latino. And here's a Latina standing next to me. It was Josie. And the guy just his brain short-circuited. So it's not just women too. Let's keep this in mind. The man short-circuited and he was like, child-free Latinos, what's that? As if he's never heard of this concept. And maybe he hasn't. He's gone all 50, 60 years of his life not understanding that there are families that exist outside of this gender norm. And some, to Brianna's point, didn't choose it. Biology chose it for them. Not everybody who wanted kids gets to have them, and vice versa. So, it blew his mind, and he started talking about his daughter and his legacy. And Josie jumped in and she's like, there's lots of different ways to leave a legacy. Do you remember that, Josie?
I do. He was wild. He was really adamant that you have a child. And it was like, and he made the point. And I remember saying that you just made her point why she's doing this podcast, why she does this, because here you are, she's telling you, and you just hit 3 of her bingo card points right there. So I don't think he still got it. I still think he thought she was wrong and whatever, but what are you going to do?
But I didn't have to say a word because Josie, my mama bear, was there. And more often than not, that has been my experience in real life. In real life, whenever anyone wants to have a debate with me about the morality of it, anyone from my own mother-in-law to just random strangers on the street, there's always been another ally in the room. Whether it's my husband or whether it was one of my bridesmaids at our engagement party, that's where that came up. I don't think that most people believe it's black and white. I really don't. I think more people have the critical thinking skills to kind of, okay, it's not for me, but I get it. I don't like Brussels sprouts. I don't understand how people put those things in their mouths. But clearly some of you think I'm the weirdo. You're still my friend though, right? You would still defend my right not to eat Brussels sprouts.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to say about you're saying about the gender roles and how it pretty much, and that's why people feel the way they feel, and what can we do about it? And kind of like you mentioned, how the world right now is just crazy and they're fighting to go back to the olden days and all this kind of stuff. My son and my niece are both Gen Z, right? Born in 1996 or over. And both of them say they don't want kids. They don't want kids because of the way the world is. They don't want kids because they feel like, everything is so expensive and they can't afford them. And so neither them or their family would have a productive, comfortable life. And so I feel that the generation that's coming up after us might be the one that's going to really change the dynamic, because I know that's just 2 of them, but you hear their friends talk and I already had kids at 20, my son is 26, going to be 27. I already had kids. My sister already had kids. My niece is already the age that they would have had kids. And all of them are all growing up older, holding out. Some say they will. My son says he doesn't. My niece says she doesn't. And I remember listening to your podcast where your mom was talking about grandchildren and whatever. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't feel this need to have grandchildren. I'm perfectly fine. If my son says he doesn't want them, I'm cool. I think he still has a lot of growing up to do. So I prefer that he doesn't, or at least not for a long time. And you know what? I don't feel like I'm not going to be a complete person if I don't have grandchildren. So I do feel like the generation coming up after us is seeing a lot of stuff. The women aren't going to be like in the kitchen barefoot cooking. They're really fighting against that. And even the men are like, you know what? I got to support this, and I don't got the money for all that. And maybe our life might just be easier, in a different way. So I think there's hope. Maybe not, for right now, but soon.
Yeah, well, I think as weird as it sounds, like, I think having a conversation like this where there's moms involved saying like, hey, I can see, why you wouldn't want to have kids, or, like moms speaking up and saying like, I don't know. I mean, I've had mom friends before that are like, had babies before me and are just like, it's the most beautiful, amazing thing. And they kind of like set you up for this. Like, no way. Right after I had my first and I'm trying to breastfeed, like, it was not fun at all. Like, I was like, no, that was like sleep deprived. Like, it was not a beautiful thing that people act like it is. So I think just being more honest about how hard it is for some people. I mean, I do think breastfeeding like clicks for some people. It's really hard for some people. Like you're saying, it's not black and white. Like, it doesn't have to be a certain way. And I think just more people telling their stories and talking about the different perspectives. I mean, I remember like at the beginning of the pandemic, we have friends who are married with no kids, and we were trapped in the house with like a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old. And I would look at Matt and be like, I wonder what Laura and Dan are doing right now. Like, they'd be like, this was all your idea. Like, don't even bring them up. Because they were like having a lot of free time and doing a lot of cool things. And we were like stuck. So, I mean, like talking about that, but I feel like like as a mom, you're not supposed to say that or complain. And then like as a non-mom, you're supposed to have kids. Like, it's just all these like unspoken, like what you're supposed to do. And I feel like if people just start talking about what they're actually doing and how they feel about it, a lot of those like mysterious things would go away,
Agreed. It does start with the open discussion. And I think you're right, Deanna, that I have no idea what goes on inside homes with young children, with older children. I know what I experienced growing up as a child in my home, but that's all I know. I do have friends with kids, very few nowadays, because again, post-pandemic, it's been hard to like get back together with people, and not everybody's relationships survived that. So all of that being said, yeah, I think it comes from talking about it and getting together and airing it out, because being a mom is hard. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. So I hope that you both have spaces and you have friends and your friends have spaces to get that out. Otherwise, who are you dumping it on but your kids or your
Well,
spouse, which is even worse.
Dilly was talking about her job and stuff, and I used to be a teacher. And at the end of my teaching career, I taught at elementary school. And part of the reason I also had to leave was because all of my patients were gone by the time I got home to deal with my own kids. I was like, the kids at school have used it all up, and I'm being like kind of a cranky jerk to my kids. Right. So it was like, okay, which kids am I going to choose? The students or my kids? Okay, I'll pick my kids. And so now I don't do that anymore. And I work from home, but one kid's in elementary school, one kid's at daycare, because I need time to like do what I need to do. And, a little bit of like absence makes the heart grow fonder too, I think. Like my patients are rejuvenated. I like the work I do during the day. And then when they come home, we do all the things that we, need to do that are kind of chores sometimes, but also kind of fun, so.
But the process in the process of all of that, you're raising what we are hoping are well-adjusted human beings, right? Like that the end result. Right. But also, what if they're child free? You spoke very early on that they might decide that the gender binary does not apply to them, but also the traditional gender roles and having children may not apply to them.
And that goes back to them being people. Like, it's their own lives. So like grandma's expecting kids and like doing all that, like that's wild to me, because I'm like, This is their life. They get to choose what they're going to do. And it's not like, I think too, maybe some of the people who are giving y'all the hate are kind of people who think of their kids maybe as like property, or like, I don't know. I think it's weird. It's like, I just happened to create these two kids, but it's just part of the, like, they're like roommates. I mean, I have to help them more than I would a roommate, but you know what I mean? Like, I still think of them as people, people
Right.
that I'm like
Yeah.
helping learn when not to like scratch your sister's face off or something like that. But like, people who have their
They're
own decision
borrowed.
makings.
Like they're
Yeah,
borrowed.
yeah. And I hope that I
Yeah.
raise them to do cool stuff, but it's
That's
not like they owe it to me to do anything in life.
Right.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think that is the crux of the issue right there. That maybe many people don't realize that that's a human being, not just your child. And maybe it's the lacking of the like foresight.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're raising, like you said, a human being. They're not going to stay babies forever. They're going to grow. They're going to go through like puberty to do this and to do that. And then they're going to go and live their own life. And like, you can't just be like, no, 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 but you're mine the entire time. Like, the idea is that you give them the wisdom, teach them what you need to teach them, and be like, time for you to float off and be on your own and experience, make mistakes, live your life to the best of your ability. If you need help, I'm here. I'm going to help you. That goes beyond like being a parent. Like, I want to be there for my best friend's kid. If she wants to talk to me, like in 14 years because there's a boy she likes and she doesn't want to feel like she needs to talk to her mom, I want to be that person. Like, I'll be there. We can talk boys. The little one that I nanny, she's already picking out, lipstick colors and everything, and she's super girly. So I'm just like, by all means, I will be your makeup buddy and I will be that person. It doesn't matter if I'm your nanny in 10 years. It matters that you and I have built this relationship now that can last 20, 30, 40 years down the line, and you can still feel close enough. Sorry about that. You can still feel close to me and well enough like to be like, hey, I can call if I can't get like, my parents' advice, I can call Dilly for her advice during whatever time. But like, that's what we're there for. Like, we're not just gonna be, we are raising human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can't take that away from them. Like, they have their own autonomy, their own personal like goals and achievement, like accomplishments and everything.
Can we also just say for a second that if we're treating kids like people, and people are like, oh, you hate kids, like, well, I don't want anybody to hate anybody, but like, you're gonna like some kids better than some other kids, and you're gonna like grown-ups, some grown-ups better than other grown-ups. So like, a kid who's up at 6 a.m. kicking your wall in a hotel is not gonna be your favorite kid, like, regardless of how they ended up there. They wouldn't be my favorite kid.
Exactly.
If it was my kid, they wouldn't be my favorite kid at 6 a.m. kicking the wall in my hotel room with me. So I feel like that's another thing where it's like, why is it like you hate all kids? Or like, you don't want to have kids, so you hate kids. But sometimes if you hang out with enough not awesome kids, that could very well skew your idea about whether or not you want to have kids, because you're like, ah.
Yeah.
So I just think like treating everybody like an individual, like, can we not
They're
just
all
treat everyone like an
individuals.
individual? Is that too hard? I don't know. Now I'm getting mad. We need more panels. We need more panels.
We can do more panels,
And
everyone.
I don't,
I love this.
and I don't like Brussels sprouts fixed every way. There are some good Brussels sprouts and there are some bad Brussels sprouts. Like, we got to take each one of the Brussels sprouts on its own too.
I love that the Brussels sprouts analogy has just grown. I do want to go back to Brianna's point about how she's avoided some of this like nastiness online because she leads with education, but she has to drop the C word before people are like, oh, why do some people not just give the grace from the get-go? Why aren't they approaching it with curiosity? And we can't answer this question because we're not those people, but I'm putting it out there for the viewing audience that not all people who don't have children are in that circumstance by choice. Maybe it wasn't a choice, and later on they just made lemons out of lemonade, and they're like, yeah, well, look at all this stuff I got instead. But that's not true for everybody. And even if they could have had children and chose not to, why is it that if they couldn't, well, then I'm going to respect your choice, but just because they didn't, I'm not going to? So that's not for us to answer, because we're not those people who have those ideas. But for the viewing audience, I do want you to think about that. How, you know, one, not everybody who wanted kids could have them, and that could be painful for them. But two, even if they could have kids, no one is under the obligation to. So treating everyone as if it's just, if you were going to change your mind because of circumstances, if that makes you more empathetic, I would think that you could you have the capacity for empathy then for people who just don't have children for whatever reason, because the reasons are none of anyone's business.
But I think that your point is exactly that. When you can't, that's not your choice in their mind. So they're like, well, poor you. You didn't choose this. I'm sure you'd have 10 kids if it wasn't for whatever situation. But someone else, oh, you have a perfectly working body and you're choosing not to. I think that's exactly where their mind frame is. And that's where they will differ. That's where they will, oh, feel okay, no, I get it, oh, and then he'll have pity for you, but the other person's like, that's just some selfish person that doesn't want to bring the joy of children into their lives. That's kind of how
Sure.
I think that most of them see it.
Right,
Well, and
right.
why would you want someone to have a kid who's not, even if they definitely don't want one, but if someone was like, I don't know if I want to have a kid, I'm just going to try it and see, I would still be like, maybe wait a second, like, and think about, like, I don't know why anybody would want someone to have kids who straight up doesn't want to. Like, what is that mindset too? That's a
Hmm.
little
It's
wacky.
the same mindset that is now allowing for children to work in factories again. It's I can't divorce those two ideas, because which one of you said earlier on that we're creating more little workers?
Hmm.
We're
Right.
feeding the capitalist
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
That is scary. I'm really hoping that those laws are rolled back very quickly. That it's just
Speaking
smokescreen for, you know, bullshit.
speaking of children and capitalists and stuff, there's also another crazy bill out there that is essentially providing like an okay for kids to marry as early as 12 years
Oh
of
yeah,
age.
terrible.
Like, excuse me?
I mean,
What,
anyone under
what are we
25, their
doing?
brain still isn't fully formed. At 12, you're barely entering puberty. Yikes. I
Mm-mm.
thought we were like 300 years past that, because people live longer now. They don't
Yeah.
have to marry at 12 and start pumping out kids in hopes that one or two survive till they're 30. Yikes.
Like,
Yikes.
I I have been very confused with all that's been coming out. I'm like, I sit there and I watch like these reels on Instagram, whether it's like my personal one or my child-free one, and I'm like sitting there going, what am I looking at? I showed it to my husband and he had like the most confused look on his face, like, what did I just watch? I'm like,
I don't know,
I
man.
don't know. Like, how are we expecting children who are not teens yet?
It's gross. We're never going to wrap our head around that. That's just
Yeah. Yeah.
terrible.
Agreed. Agreed. It's terrible. I hope that that doesn't pass. I do want to start wrapping this up, and I want to end on a positive note, because I think we definitely felt a lot of emotions. I know I did. So I'd like to wrap up by saying I agree with all of you who said that the future the future generation is figuring it out early, and even if they do decide to have children, that they're going to be more mindful about it. That's my hope. That's my hope. That is my experience in the people I know who are Gen Z. I'm sure that isn't true for the entire generation, just like all of Gen X isn't as cool as us, but so in that vein, I'm going to give each of you another minute to kind of give your closing thoughts here. And it can be on whatever it was we discussed. But Brianna, why don't you go ahead?
I will say, for me, I make the personal decision to lead with grace. I realize that that's not everybody's decision to lead with grace. There's going to be more people like me out there. And I think it's going to take us really finding our voices and finding support, whether it's from child-free friends, from parent friends, finding that support to empower yourself to be able to start leading with grace and start having those conversations. I think that's going to be really important going forward. And also stepping back from fear, regardless of what side of the spectrum you're on, whether you're child free or whether you're a parent, stepping back from that fear, realizing that nothing's going to happen overnight. Nobody's going to change your mind overnight. And regardless of how many conversations you have with somebody that thinks differently than you, that doesn't mean you're going to change your mind. So don't be afraid to dip your toes in the water, and don't be afraid to start having some of those open-ended conversations with people. You'd be surprised at what you learn.
Nicely put. Josie?
So, my thought is that it's possible that a lot of these people are just hateful and don't actually think that everybody that doesn't have kids is selfish or bad. So, I feel like it's the simple the maybe what society says, and that a lot of them don't even believe it. It's just like, "Oh, I need a comeback. Let me just throw that out there." And if deep down when they're by themselves really thinking about it, it's not really how they feel. So, in that aspect, maybe it's easier to not think, wow, half the world or whatever portion of people, a lot of them are just blowing smoke. So that's kind of how I interpret a lot of it, because there just seems a lot of hating, and sometimes that's just causing trouble. They want to troll, maybe they don't even believe half of what they say. So deep down, it's possible that there isn't that many people in the world that actually feel that way, even if they say it.
That is a nice thought. Well, maybe. Thinking that maybe they're just trolling for the hell of it. Okay. But you're right. They may not all really feel that way if they actually examined it. Deanna?
I think just approaching everybody like they don't owe you anything, whether it's like your children, like if you're thinking they owe you grandchildren, or your neighbor, like nobody, like everyone gets to just live their own story, live their own life. So I think kind of like Brianna said, like with grace, but also like curiosity. I don't, maybe you said that word, I'm just repeating you, but just hearing their story, and nobody like has to have a diagnosis to say no, or a reason, or it doesn't have to be their career or anything. Like people just get to choose what they want to do, and then just getting to know people for their own stories and their different paths, I think would be maybe a way to start.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Diliana?
So I think that with us child-free folks out there, we just need to make our voices heard, teach and educate, let people know that we do, in fact, maybe not all of us, but the majority of us love children. We can take them in smaller doses and everything. We don't have to have them for ourselves to share the love with the ones that we get to be exposed to. And as Brianna said, leading with grace and leading with curiosity and love and certain conversations, and just explaining things, even though we don't know anybody an explanation or a diagnosis to justify our choice in being child free. But I do believe that all the child free community just keep doing what we're doing and just educating and making our voices heard. And I think we're going to be onto something at some point. It may take a little while, but we're getting there.
We are getting there. I do have to thank I have to thank all of you, but I know we're getting there because I've met the two moms on this call, one through social media and one through podcasting, which is kind of an extension of social media, I feel like. But I'm just saying that, yes, in my experience, the people I meet who are parents are pretty freaking cool people because, again, I treat them as people. we treat one another as people. We take ourselves as individuals that we are, as opposed to this monolith that, oh, you're a child-free person, you belong on that hill, and I'm over here on this hill. So thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. Is there anything else anybody would like to say?
Thank you for having us here. I really hope we can do this again. I really love connecting with other child-free people, but also parents, because again, I believe that's the way forward. And teaming up, and being able to support each other, that's how we're going to make change.
Agreed. I do want to thank everyone for making the time to be here today, because it's not just a pet peeve, it's a real problem. And I think that it does begin to we start eliminating these ideas from our culture by talking about it in an open forum. So I do thank you for being here for the first time to do this. We can continue to do this. We can swap out people and just continue having the conversation. So thank you, everyone, for your time. If you want to follow any of the people here on today's call, I'll have all of their links in the show notes or in the description. Yes, this is not a podcast. This is a YouTube video. Everybody can be found in the description. Please leave your comment. And if you're going to comment something negative about being child-free, save your energy and just go on to the next video. Thanks. Hit the like button and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get a notification. How am I doing as a YouTuber?
Nailing it.
Killing it.
And that's a burrito. Muchísimas gracias for watching La Vida Más Chévere. Check out the audio-only version anywhere you listen to podcasts and join the community over on Substack.